So we will take up this poem, A God's Labor, by Sri Aurobindo. I do not know if you have read this before, but it is as one of the well-known biographer of Sri Aurobindo wrote, it is in A God's Labor that Sri Aurobindo has described in its entirety his integral yoga of man's and earth's transformation. So imagine the importance of this single poem. This critic says it describes in its entirety the integral yoga of man's and earth's transformation. That is one of the reasons why I chose to study this poem, because the deeper you go, we will see the entire vision, the entire yoga given in a nutshell here. And it is the process of this transformation that is depicted in this poem. Not a very long one, and yet 31 stanzas. You know, it is about 124 lines, and it has a great autobiographical note about it. Because here, in this poem, we can see the protagonist, the I that is mentioned here everywhere, is the poet himself. He is not the poet, but even the author himself. That is to say, we see Sri Aurobindo writing about his own work that he is doing for the earth, he has done for the earth and wants to do for the earth and humanity. And remember, this poem was written in 1935. The last version that is given of this poem is 31/7/1935, 31st July 1935. And that's the period when Sri Aurobindo is said to have taken up the final writing of Savitri. So, and then what is amazing is that many of these concepts, and sometimes even the phrases and even the full lines, are more or less taken up fully into Savitri. So you can see the authenticity of this experience of this poem, that these lines are even seen in Savitri later on. I mean, years later he writes Savitri, and yet we find many of these lines reflected in Savitri. And as we dig deeper into the chronology of Sri Aurobindo's yoga, we see that 1935 has been a year where Aurobindo writes that I read out from him. He says he is holding the tail of the supramental. He says, at least until I have firm physical hold of the tail of the supramental and can come and tell the mentals and humans, no doubt in language which will be unintelligible to them, for they have totally misunderstood even the little I have already written about it. Well, this was an answer to some letter, but what is important for us is that he had already connected to Supermind. And another letter to, this is again, the letter that I read was on 23rd of August 1935, and the same year on 24th of November, he writes to another disciple, the tail of the supermind is descending, is only the tail at present, but where the tail can pass, the rest will follow. So I want you to understand the consciousness which he had when he was writing this poem. He was already in connection with the supermind, the tail end he says, but that's the beginning of the contact. And this, as it says, tail is descending, the tail of the supermind is descending, which we can suppose that it goes on descending until he ends with Savitri, and on 5th of December 1950, the whole thing manifests. So this kind of pulling the tail lasted almost for 15 years, and by 1950, it had descended fully into his body. That's why he left his body in 1950. So this is why what I find is the interesting point between this poem and Savitri. Here was the beginning seen in this poem, and Savitri is the end where there is a fulfillment of this descent. So this is the background to his own level of consciousness. And now, having this contact, what is the work he has taken up? So I read out the poem, not the whole thing, because I have divided this poem into different sections which are really the most important concepts wherein they are coming. So accordingly, I'll be taking this study of this poem and the main concepts. The first section is regarding the avatar. The most important concepts are the avatar, his mission and work. Second part of this section is the suffering of the avatar. Third part of the section is the avatar working in the inconscient. And the fourth part is the avatar's success. Well, I'll be dealing with these four ideas of the avatar in greater detail, and you will see all these concepts are captured in these stanzas, different stanzas. So I'm not going to take up this poem in a sequential order, but as the thoughts come up into different sections, I'll take them up. The second part, our second section, is man's resistance, the human resistance and the hostile forces against the work of the avatar. You see, this is very important, I'll tell you later. And the third section will be dealing with the new race and the fulfillment of the dreams of God. So these are the three main concepts that I will be dealing in these next 3 days. The avatar, the different parts of the avatar's work, then the human resistance and the hostile forces, and the third part is the new race, the coming of the new race. So these are the 3 parts. Now, to take up the poem, this is the very title is of great significance, because there seems to be some kind of a self-contradiction in the title. Because normally we never think of the labor of the gods. We always think, the gods are successful, they are happy-go, they are nothing to be afraid of, they have all the power. But Aurobindo here has put together God's labor, a God's labor. So there is a precise connotation in this labor. What is the labor that the God goes through? Obviously, the God here does not mean the one who is in his transcendental level. It means God who has descended upon earth. In other words, what we have in Sanskrit, Incarnation or the avatar. So this is precisely a poem where we see the labor, the difficulties that an avatar goes through upon this earth. Because normally this part of the avatar's work is not taken into account. You see, I'll read out some portions later, where one of the disciples called Nirodharan, maybe you have heard of him or read some of his books. If we haven't read anything by Nirodharan, read one book at least. 12 years with Sri Aurobindo. Nirodharan has written quite many books, but that's a marvelous book, 12 years with Sri Aurobindo. Read that if you can. Well, he was there with Sri Aurobindo right from early 1930s, and he had a very unique relation with Sri Aurobindo. Unlike any other disciple, he could take the liberty of humor, jokes, lightheartedness with Sri Aurobindo. Whereas all the other disciples were, they kept a distance with the master, they venerated him, and so they would not dare speak anything in a light tone. But here was one sadhak who had adapted this, and Sri Aurobindo had accepted this relationship between the two. So in one of his notes he writes to Sri Aurobindo, that's what's great about your work, because you are an avatar and for you everything is easy. We don't really think that you go through any problems, as such, because we consider you as an avatar and incarnation. So it is in defense of that kind of criticism, which was there quite continuously over quite many months, that Sri Aurobindo wrote to him quite many answers, which we will be quoting during our study. So a God's labor is definitely the labor of an incarnation or an avatar, and more precisely here, it is the labor that Mother and Sri Aurobindo themselves have gone through as incarnations upon this earth. So by reading this, we'll know a bit of the side of the sadhana part, the work part, what they have done for you and me and for the earth. So let me take up the first couple of stanzas. I have gathered my dreams in a silver air between the gold and the blue, and wrapped them softly and left them there, my jeweled dreams of you. I had hoped to build a rainbow bridge, marrying the soil to the sky, and so in this dancing planet midge, the moods of infinity. But before I go further, I have a little note from the mother, who has herself explained the first stanza. The silver air is a spiritual realm. You see, I have gathered my dreams in a silver air. What is the silver air? It is a spiritual realm. The gold is the supramental and the blue is the mind. So what it means, I have gathered my dreams in a silver air in a spiritual realm between the supramental and the mental. So you start imagining this picture here, that the poet is telling. Now first of all you should know, by jeweled dreams of you, who is that you? Normally I think, as his mother herself has answered, the question is, Aurobindo says, my jeweled dreams of you, for whom does the you stand? The mother says, it is better to keep what Aurobindo wanted us to understand. God speaking to his creation, the earth. So we have now the important ideas. So the poet is speaking about earth, and he says, I have built beautiful jeweled dreams of you. And what are these dreams? They have been kept in a spiritual realm. And what is the spiritual realm? It is between the supramental and the mental. So this is the scenario, and you take note of this stanza because that's more or less the same stanza that we are going to end with in stanza number 31. So let me read it again. I have gathered my dreams in a silver air. So now you see, the first time we see the word dreams. And mother says, the dreams means all the unrealized expectations that have to be realized in future. These dreams are kept softly and lovingly protected for the possibility of their realization. So this is the beginning where he says, I have gathered my dreams, and then in the end we see the same thing repeated but in a different tone. So the opening is a beautiful, very soft, I would say, as mother mentions here, kept them softly and lovingly, as he himself writes, because it's a very delicate dream and he's dreaming of a beautiful earth. So he has kept those possibilities of the dream between the supermind and the mind. And now we see what is going to happen to the dream. And next we see, you see, I must warn you that this is a highly philosophic poem, I can quite imagine, because it has reference to Avatar and his inconscient and all that. So I'm going to take you a little bit into deeper philosophy. Now, I had hoped to build a rainbow bridge, marrying the soil to the sky. And so in this dancing planet midge, the moods of infinity. Now here is something that we see on the mother. this is where we start entering into the deeper philosophy. Now, this question of the rainbow bridge is the work that is being done by the avatar. And the mother says, many avatars have come, many yogis have come, many saints have come, many vibhutis have come and gone. But then basically, there are two ways of helping humanity. And that's something interesting to know. She calls him, there is a negative help and a positive help. To begin with, there is a way that might be called negative, the way provided by Buddhism and kindred religions. What's the way? Not to see. First of all, to be in such a state of purity and beauty that you do not perceive the ugliness and evil. It is like something that does not touch you because it does not exist in you. This is the perfection of the negative method. It's quite elementary. Never to notice evil, never to speak of the evil in others, not to perpetuate these vibrations by observation, by criticism, by insistence on what is bad. That is what the Buddha taught. Each time you speak of an evil, you help to spread it. So this is the first, or this is the negative help. That means you do not want to recognize the evil. You do not want to say, this is wrong, this is bad, this is ugly, this is evil. That is because, as Buddha says very beautifully, each time you speak of an evil, of something bad, of this or that, you are giving strength to the negative force. So the best thing is, as we have that famous three monkeys, do not see evil, do not speak about evil, do not hear evil. So that's the kind of a withdrawal from the world, from this evil, from this ugliness. And then you yourself live in such a high consciousness that you are not affected by this ugly and the evil and the wrong things around. So that is one of the, as Mother calls it here, provided by Buddhism and kindred religions. There may be other religions. It's for us to find out. But important is, this is one way of living in the world. Be away from it. Do not discuss about it. Do not encourage. Do not criticize out of it. But then she says, this barely touches the problem. The second is to positively be conscious of the supreme good and supreme beauty behind all things, which sustains all things and enables them to exist. When you see Him, you are able to perceive Him behind this mask and this distortion. Even this ugliness, this wickedness, this evil is a disguise of something which is essentially beautiful or good, luminous, pure. Now this is what we can call the Vedantic view. That we have to recognize the ugly and the bad and the evil and all that. We are not blind, we are not closing our eyes to this reality. We have to recognize what is the real, what is the reality, and yet instead of closing our eyes to it, what is the attitude we take? That even behind this ugliness and the evil and the wrong things, there is some supreme beauty, there is some divinity. Now this is the Vedantic view, that there is nothing called evil or ugly or nothing. It is there on the level, physical level, it is there. But behind this also there is something, someone, some Brahman, some higher consciousness, which has for the present is appearing like this. So this is the realistic view, the positive view, the other one is the negative view. Why am I bringing this? Because it's relevant to this poem. So he says, once you have this kind of a positive view, that I know that there is evil, but I also know that behind this ugly and the evil, there is the Brahman, there is the higher consciousness, which has, for the sake of evolution, taken up such a form. But it's not the finale, it's not the end, it doesn't exist forever. Now this is what is important at the end of the explanation. Then comes the true collaboration. For when you have this vision, this perception, when you live in this consciousness, it also gives you the power to draw that down into the manifestation, to the earth, and to bring it into contact with what now distorts and disguises, so that little by little this distortion and this disguise are transformed by the influence of the truth that is behind. And this is Aurobindo, where he says that if you recognize the evil and the ugly, but with this consciousness that there is a truth behind all this. If you recognize this reality, then you have the possibility of bringing down the truth. You call it supramental truth, you call it Brahman consciousness, well, it's not important. But if this kind of a recognition, then you can bring it down and transform the ugly and the evil and the bad. This is precisely what Sri Aurobindo and the Mother have taken up. They are not blind to the ugliness and the evil of this world. They are not, and yet they are not disappointed, disillusioned by this, as many acharyas who have gotten disillusioned by this negativity, by the darkness, by the ignorance of this world, and then they said, world is a shunya, it doesn't exist. So you reject the world because it's ignorant, it's dark and all that. But here is Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, who say, no, there is a darkness, there is an ugliness, but we have to fight it back. How do we fight it back? By bringing down that which stands above it. They have called it the supramental force, the supramental consciousness, and they say we bring that down to transform. So this is the positive way. You don't run away from the problem, but you fight it back, not with an attitude of vengeance, not with an attitude of killing, but with the attitude of a transformation by the force that's beyond. So these are the two ways that Mother speaks of, and that is what comes into this stanza, where we see that Sri Aurobindo has spoken about this, because here is one person who has recognized, somewhere he says, that this world, there is ugliness, there is death, there is falsehood, all the negativity that we see here. First of all, he recognizes and accepts. The important thing is, he accepts the falsehood of this world. That's why, as some of you may know, the lines from the prayer of Ashwapati, wherein when he speaks to the Supreme Mother, is a similar prayer. What Sri Aurobindo and Ashwapati they are praying is the same, because the poet has the same prayer that Ashwapati has. He says, how shall I rest content with mortal days and the dull measure of terrestrial things? I who have seen behind the cosmic mask the glory and the beauty of thy face. Hard is the doom to which thou bindest thy sons. How long shall our spirits battle with the night and bear defeat and the brute yoke of death, who are vessels of a deathless force and builders of the Godhead of the race? You see, here there is a recognition by Ashwapati, which means by Sri Aurobindo, that we cannot be living, there is in these mortal days all this doom and all this death and all this defeat. So he's praying to the mother, but how long shall we really remain in these mortal days? Because there's a long passage, just I'm picking up some relevant lines. Too little the strength that now with us is born, too faint the light that steals through nature's lids, too scant the joy with which she buys our pain. In a brute world that knows not its own sense, thought racked upon the wheel of birth we live, the instruments of an impulse not our own, moved to achieve with our heart's blood for prize, half knowledge, half creations that soon tire. A foiled immortal soul in perishing limbs, baffled and beaten back, we labor still, annulled, frustrated, spent, we still survive. I brought out these lines and a few of them only to emphasize that Sri Aurobindo recognizes the weakness, the difficulties of the human being. First of all, as we said, we must accept. Now, once we accept this problem, then he asks Supreme Mother, like Ashwapati, incarnate the white passion of thy force, mission to earth some living form of thee. One moment filled with thy eternity, let thy infinity in one body live. All knowledge wrap one mind in seas of light, all love throb in one human heart, throb single in one human heart. Pack with the eternal might one human hour, and with one gesture change all future time. So this is exactly to show what we have said in the Mother's light. Once you recognize the evil, then you invoke the divine, then you bring down the Supreme for transformation. That's exactly the theme that we see in Savitri too, that Ashwapati first of all sees the evil, sees the incompleteness, and then he invokes the Divine Mother to come down. That's the positive way. But then if you have read, those of you who have read Savitri would remember the answer that the Divine Mother gives to Ashwapati. She says very beautifully, awake not the immeasurable descent. Awake not the immeasurable descent. Speak not my secret name to hostile time. Man is too weak to bear the infinite's weight. Truth born too soon might break the imperfect earth. You see, these are the difficulties that are there in the spiritual endeavor. So you may be eager to transform. You may be wanting to ask the Divine Mother to come down. But the Divine says, too soon, truth born too soon might break the imperfect earth. So there has got to be a preparation. So this is now next stage we are going, where Sri Aurobindo says that I want to build in this dancing planet midst the moods of infinity. That's what Ashwapati is telling, that the old divine infinite come down, but then the Mother says, not yet. The earth has not yet prepared itself for my descent. And in one of the letters, as Mother narrates here, Sri Aurobindo has explained this in one of his letters. Someone asked him, why does it not come immediately? He answered like this, if divine love were to manifest in its essence upon earth, it would be like a bombshell, because the earth is neither supple nor receptive enough to be able to widen itself to the dimensions of this love. It not only needs to open, but to widen itself and to become more supple. Matter is still too rigid, and even the substance of the physical consciousness Not only the material matter, but the substance of the physical consciousness is too rigid. So what I've discovered is that the same line of experience goes through Savitri, goes through the explanations of the mother, goes through some of his own letters to disciples. So when disciples were eager to get the divine love manifest, he says no. If a manifest is too early, it will be like a bombshell, because the earth is neither supple nor receptive enough. In fact, the earth may get destroyed, on the contrary, by the descent of this divine love. So you see, friends, what happens is, we may be impatient that why is the world like that? We may say there have been great avatars, Christ has come, Buddha has come, Krishna has come, why are we like this? The same human beings. So there is an impatience on our side to get beyond, and so as somebody said, why does it not come immediately? We think once the divine comes, Krishna comes or Rama comes, the world will be changed. See, on the contrary, it says it's not a question of their coming. They can give you what all they have, the great divine love. But as the Supreme Mother also says, truth born too soon might break the imperfect earth. So the whole thing falls back upon our responsibility, that we have to prepare to receive the divine. That is where we are lacking. That's where is the delay. It's not the work of the divine is not failing us. We are failing the divine. In spite of hearing so many things from all the great avatars and great people, we are having this kind of an enthusiasm for a while, and again the whole thing sinks down. Our aspirations, inspirations, our struggles, efforts, it comes back to a very low level. That's because, again, as we know, that the foundation of the physical nature is there in the inconscient. So we are right in a way between two worlds. The world of the divine world and the world of the inconscient, the superconscient and inconscient. That is why perhaps all our efforts, we are inspired by reading Savitri, reading Bible, reading Quran, reading. But as all these inspirations, they sink down. Because you see, one part of our being gets inspired, but then the other parts of our being, that's what we have to realize, we are not a single human structure. We have different levels of our being, the physical, the vital, the mental and the spiritual. So there is always the pull of the divine, and also there is always also the pull of the inconscient. So that is one of the reasons why we are not able to transform ourselves, change ourselves in spite of our best efforts, because the greater pull, the pull of the inconscient is much greater than the aspiration, than the inspiration of the higher. So this is what we call it the part of sadhana. So in this yoga and sadhana, this is what is to be looked into, that how much can we control, can we really resist the pull of the inconscient and go toward the inspiration, the call of the superconscient. That's the whole effort of sadhana, is to control the inconscient and to go toward the superconscient. So that is basically the idea behind this word. I have hoped to build a rainbow bridge, marrying the soil to the sky. You see, that's why the word I had hoped to. I would like the human beings, that if only they could come up. But are his hopes justified? So we will see further. He says, now there is one more paragraph before I go. I would like to read out the bridge, Aurobindo has spoken about the bridge in different contexts actually. But here is what the mother has explained, and that's something quite amazing. Mother says the supramental world exists in a permanent way, and there permanently in a supramental body. I had proof of this today when my earthly consciousness went there and consciously remained there between 2 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I now know that for the two worlds to join a constant and conscious relationship, what is missing is an intermediate zone between the existing physical world and the supramental world as it exists. Here is exactly the revelation of Aurobindo using the word gold and the blue. So now we understand what Mother is telling us, that she says it is like a bridge built between the two worlds. She says, I am trying to build this bridge between the supramental world and the physical world. And she had an experience of that. She says in that afternoon that she was going between the two worlds, and this zone has to be built both in the individual consciousness and in the objective world, and it is being built. When formerly I used to speak of the new world that is being created, I was speaking of this intermediate zone. Now, I don't know how many of you know about this philosophy of this intermediate zone, but you see, Aurobindo's one of the main works, and of course as the Mother herself tells us, has been to build this bridge or the intermediate zone or the link, whatever we want to call, between the material physical world and the supramental world. So they are building up a passage. You see, it's not just enough to say that I want to realize the supermind. But how will you realize it? There is a ladder to climb up, ladder of consciousness. There is a procedure. It's not just wanting to be there and then you get overnight a kind of a revelation and you have the supramental thing. So you would say that there's got to be a transformation, a kind of a ladder. And in one of his letters to Amalkira, to Nirodbaran, he says very clearly that unless we build this ladder, this bridge, there cannot be any descent of the supermind into matter. So people may want to go there, but some of the sadhaks maybe in that time were pretty eager to realize the supermind very fast, and they said, why can't we go there? But Aurobindo says, sorry, you have got to go through the whole process of the descent of the overmental, the descent of the intuition. You have got to have the conquest of the mind, you have got to conquest of the vital. Only then you can go to the supermind. It's not just being what you are, an imperfect, impure, attached with ego, full of egoistic things, that you can aspire to have the supermind. He says there's got to be a level of achievement, a level of transformation. So it is that the Mother is telling, that she is making this intermediate zone. And a lot of this agenda that you might have read is based on this building up of this intermediate zone. Most of our experiences are, as she calls it, I'm walking through a virgin forest. I'm clearing this forest, making a path for all of you. And that is the intermediate zone. And it is that word that comes here when we think of the rainbow bridge. You see, the word bridge is very, very important, as I've told you, from the point of view of the descent and ascent, from the point of view of the intermediate zone between the physical and the supramental, from the point of view of the evolution. So that's why we have to pay a lot of importance to the word a rainbow bridge. He also mentioned very clearly marrying the soil to the sky. The sky is here, of course, the supramental sky. Soil is, of course, the earth. And so in this dancing planet midge, midge is a small thing, is a small element, is a small creature, a small fly, not even a creature. So he says this planet, this earth, is so tiny, and on this tiny little dancing earth, I want to build the moods of infinity. Now this is the question of the moods of the infinity. It's a very poetic term to tell us about the new supramental world. That the poet is wanting to build the supramental world, the moods of infinity, upon this unstable little what he calls the planet, the earth. Imagine that the poet, the God, the avatar, this is his dream. If you want to know what is the dream of the divine, the dream of the divine is to build these moods of infinity. You see, he doesn't say, it's not in the prosaic word, we can say an infinite world or a world of consciousness, but the word moods catches all these connotations of the different aspects of the infinite. Now we come to the third stanza. But too bright were our heavens, too far away, too frail their ethereal stuff, too splendid and sudden our light could not stay. The roots were not deep enough. Well, part of the things I have already described and explained to you. But too bright were our heavens, and we cannot, they are too far, we are not ready for taking up this long leap into the higher realms, because we are not prepared. The preparation is, the roots were not deep enough. That's why we are not able to take this thing, the splendid heights. In fact, there's another line from Savitri. I'm not getting that. Well, basically the idea is the same thing, that we are not yet ready for the moods of infinity. Our consciousness is not steady enough. Our wit, as you say, explained, our mind is not wide enough. Our heart and emotions are not pure enough, and so the divine cannot establish himself. So then he comes. These are the first three stanzas. Now we come to four stanzas 4, 5 and 6 and 7, which are the four different aspects of the avatar. Now we are here beginning to have the real philosophic section of avatarhood, and I think there we need to get a little deeper into the philosophy of the avatarhood. Okay? Yeah. Now this question of the avatar, as some of you who have read Aurobindo would know, that this is a concept that has been emphasized mostly in the Gita, in the Bhagavad Gita. Mostly in the sense, for the first time in Indian spiritual scriptures, it is Bhagavad Gita which really emphasizes on this aspect of the avatar, the incarnation. Before that, we had the Upanishads and the Vedas, But they did not emphasize on this idea of the avatar. And this has brought in a tremendous change in Indian psyche, because this concept of the avatar was so very important for the human growth. I'll read out a passage or two, a paragraph or two, and then I'll explain as we go along. He says, the eternal and universal self of every human being is God. Even his personal self is a part of the Godhead, not a fraction of or fragment, surely, since we cannot think of God as broken up into little pieces, but a partial consciousness of one consciousness, a partial power of the one power, a partial enjoyment of the world being by the one and universal delight of being, and therefore in manifestation, or as we say, in nature, a limited and finite being of the one infinite and illimitable being. You see, the word avatarana is a descent. Is the descent of a Godhead, is the descent of the God Spirit into the human being or into the human form. And this descent is there in all of us. You see, because there is a descent of the psychic being into all of us, we are, in a way, we can be called avatars. Avatar means that the divine has descended into all of us equally. And that descent is called the psychic being or the Atman. So therefore, we can say that we are all incarnations of the divine. Then what is the difference between we being the incarnations and the real incarnate, whom we call the real avatar? So he says, but what happens is that we are ignorant of our inner being. The difference between the avatar, the one who comes into the human form, and us is that we are not aware of our divinity, whereas the Christ and the Krishna and the Buddha, they are aware, constantly aware of their inner divinity. So that is one of the main features, awareness of their own source, awareness of their own oneness, awareness of their own supreme consciousness. So he says, man is ignorant because there is upon the eyes of his soul and all his organs the seal of that nature, Prakriti Maya, by which he has been put forth into manifestation out of God's eternal being. She has minted him like a coin out of the precious metal of the divine substance, but overlaid with a strong coating of the alloy of our phenomenal qualities, stamped with her own stamp and mark of animal humanity. And although the secret God or the secret sign of the Godhead is there, it is at first indistinguishable and always with difficulty decipherable, not to be really discovered except by that initiation into the mystery of our own being, which distinguishes a Godward from an earthward humanity. See, this is, as we explained, the problem that we have is that the divine within us is, as he puts it here, is overlaid with the coating of this Prakriti. We have these layers upon layers of the mind, the vital, the subtle physical, subtle mental. I mean, there's a completely as if the psychic being is within, and we have at least 6, 7, 8, 10 layers upon that. So the light, the power of this inner psychic being gets limited, diminished, and this light of the Supreme Divine is not able to go through these layers. So until he says, discovered except by that initiation into the mystery of our own being. So this sadhana or yoga, whatever term we want to use it, is now to take away these layers or penetrate these layers or to create windows in these layers so that the psychic being can bring out its light into the outer world. So that is one of the efforts that we are trying to make in our sadhana. Now we means is not we the number, that means the sadhana itself is to make these layers thin, transparent, so that the inner light can start coming forth, reflecting on the outer being. Now the other side, in the avatar, the divinely born man, the real substance shines through the coating. The mark of the seal is there only for form. The vision is that of the sacred God. The power of the life is that of the sacred Godhead, and it breaks through the seals of the assumed human nature. The sign of the Godhead, an inner soul sign, not outward, not physical, stands out legible for all to read, who care to see or who can see. See the difference? This avatar, for him, the real substance shines through the coating, all the coating that we have had, that we are having, of the physical. So, for the avatar, all these coatings are there, but they are transparent. With the human beings, they are thick, non-transparent, so that inner divinity cannot come in, whereas in the avatar, all the light of the inner being comes forth. So that is one of the major differences between the person whom we call the real avatar, we have taken the names, we don't have to take them again and again, or the common human being. Now next we see what is the role of the avatar. Okay, we see the difference between man and the avatar. What is the role? Why does it come, first of all? Now the first reason he says is, it is to assist that ascent or evolution, the descent is made or accepted. That the Gita makes it very clear. It is, we might say, to exemplify the possibility of the divine manifest in the human being, so that man may see what that is and take courage to grow into it. Now you see, those of us who have read the Gita, we always think that the divine comes in to take away the human sorrows, the human problems, the human resistance, etc., or to take away the dark period of the human evolution and to bring a new dharma, as you say, new law. That's one side. It's true that the avatar comes to take away the darkness that is overshadowing above the human consciousness and stopping the human growth. So avatar descends to take away, to unveil that cloud of darkness. That's one aspect. But Sri Aurobindo is not too much emphatic about that. He says, it is also to leave the influence of that manifestation vibrating in the earth nature and the soul of that manifestation presiding over its upward endeavor. It is to give a spiritual mold of divine manhood into which the seeking soul of the human being can cast itself. We have seen the first aspect, to have a new dharma. But more than that, it is to leave the influence of that manifestation vibrating in the earth nature. This is most important. Because you may say Krishna has come, Christ has come, Buddha has come for that time which was really dark in the history of human evolution. But then what has happened? How did they become Krishna and Buddha and Christ? Because there is this influence of their being vibrating in the earth nature and the soul of their manifestation presiding over its upward endeavor. So that is what is really more important, that their influence, their impact, their vibration lasts and lasts and lasts, which in some places it turns into a religion, it takes a form, it takes a church, it takes a cathedral, it takes a temple. It is a kind of outwardly this vibration is codified into a religion. But yet the vibration continues to be, because however much it gets deformed by this religionization, if I can call that, it gets deformed, it gets impaired, it gets blocked. But then those devotees who can go beyond the mold of religion can still contact Christ, can still contact Krishna, can still contact Buddha. Because this outer form that we are given to Buddhahood and Christhood and Krishnahood is a kind of a block, is a kind of a limitation. And yet Sri Aurobindo and the mother would say, however bad maybe the cathedral or the church or this, why are the Christian saints, why are the Buddhist monks who are really realized the Buddhahood? They don't get limited by the form that Buddhism or Christhood or Krishnahood has taken. They have to go beyond the form of religion. So that is why when we speak in Aurobindo of no religion, but we don't say no spirituality. Because behind every religion there is this essence of an experience. Essence of what Sri Aurobindo would call manifestation of vibrating in the earth nature. So what is important is to contact that vibration, which in one of my letters to the mother she had mentioned. I was talking about Shiva and these people whom I had seen in the dream. Mother says Shiva is there nowadays, very, very active in the ashram and in the world. And then you can see him. And then she adds as a note in parenthesis almost to say, even Sri Aurobindo can be contacted in the subtle physical for those of you who have eyes to see. So that is, today Aurobindo has come up, Sri Aurobindo ashram has come up, so many hundreds of branches of ashram have come up. This was never ever envisaged in 1926 when the ashram had begun. But how is it that Aurobindo was born after so many years and then we have 50 years of Aurobindo passing through? Because of the living vibrations of these avatars. You go to Ramanashram, you will see plenty of sadhaks saying, we know the contact with Ramakrishna ashram. You see a lot of people have connection with Sri Ramakrishna, Vivekananda. So the greatness of the spiritual beings is not just during the physical life what they have done, but what they are doing after they have left the physical. Because then, as Sri Aurobindo very beautifully said, when the mother asked him to revive, he said, why did you come back in the body? Sri Aurobindo said, no, I will not come back. I can act better from the other side. So when the physical is left behind, they are liberated from the physical, but then their action becomes much more dynamic universally. That is what Sri Aurobindo calls here, that the influence of that manifestation vibrating in earth nature. So that is number two. First is the question of their own work done against the evil. Second, which is much more lasting. We can say at the time of Sri Krishna, there was this evil of Ravan, there's the evil of Kamsa, there's the evil. Those are the physical evils at his own time. But Krishna has outlasted the Mahabharata. Krishna has really lived on for centuries more. And that influence is much more important than his killing his Ravana or Kansa at his time. The second one, as we discussed just now, it is to give a dharma, a religion, not a mere creed, but a method of inner and outer living, a way, a rule and law of self-molding by which he can grow towards divinity. See, very clearly says that it is to give a dharma, a religion, but not a mere creed. He is very emphatic to say that let's not convert this avatar's teachings into a creed, and which unfortunately is what mankind has done. We have converted all these avatars into a creed and a caste, and then we said, I am the best, this is mine, that's not yours. He says it's not that. What they have given is a method of inner and outer living, a way, a rule and law of self-molding by which he can grow towards divinity. So the essence of all this avatar's teaching is a way of living by which you grow towards the divine. Not that you become a faithful Christian or a faithful Muslim or a faithful Hindu or a Buddhist. Nothing to do with Christ would not at all mind if you really become a worshipper of Krishna or a worshipper of Sri Krishna Aurobindo. Not at all. As long as you are growing toward the divine in your consciousness, none of these avatars have a clash between themselves saying, hey, why did you become a Christian, why I was a Buddhist? It is we the human beings, we have these clashes of changing religions, you should not trespass with other religion. But the divine himself, the avatar himself, doesn't have this clash. because he has come to help humanity to grow towards the divine. So he has given a rule of life of self-molding towards the divine. Now the third one, it is two. Since this growth, this ascent is no mere isolated and individual phenomenon, but like all in the divine world activities, a collective business, a work and a work for the race to assist the human march, to hold it together in its great crisis, to break the forces of the downward gravitation when they grow too insistent, to uphold or restore the great dharma of the Godhead law in man's nature, to prepare even, however far off, the kingdom of God, the victory of the seekers of light and perfection, and the overthrow of those who fight for the continuance of the evil and darkness. Now this is the third one. It is not an individual achievement. Every avatar comes for a collective business, as he calls it, to give the growth of a collective consciousness. So let's not pull down each avatar into mine and my religion and my caste and my country. In fact, they have come to elevate the entire human consciousness. There's a global consciousness about it. There's a global work behind it. So that aspect we have converted into that kind of a, conversion. Christians converting themselves, others into Christianity, Islam into Islam. So we think that global consciousness is numerical, that I want 5 million or 50 million disciples. We go on conversion and we go by the global means we want more and more numbers of our disciples. But theirs is not that. They have come to elevate the human consciousness wherever they are, in whatever form, in whichever country, wherever. So it's more the collective consciousness. So he says, that is the third contribution of the avatar. Now, having said this, the last thing that he will explain before we take up the poem again, that is what is the really linking with this poem. The avatar does not come as the thaumaturgic magician, but as the divine leader of humanity and the exemplar of a divine humanity. Now, even in human sorrow and physical suffering, he must assume and use as to show, first, how that suffering may be a means of redemption, as did Christ. Secondly, to show how, having been assumed by the divine soul in the human nature, it can also be overcome in the same nature as did Buddha. The rationalist who would have cried to Christ, "If thou art the Son of God, come down from the cross," or points out sagely that the avatar was not divine because he died and died too by disease, as the dog dieth, knows not when he say what he is saying, for he has missed the root of the whole matter. Even the avatar of sorrow and suffering must come before there can be the avatar of divine joy. And this is the most important thing that is connected with with the poem that we are studying now. That even the human sorrow and physical suffering he must assume and use it so as to show how that suffering may be a means of redemption. So one of the major things of the avatar, apart from the three reasons that we have seen, is that the avatar takes upon himself all the human sorrows and suffering, all the limitations of the body and the mind and the vital, in order to only to show us physically as a kind of a leader on the path, a person, a leader walking on the earth, that how you think that you are weak, you have limitations, you are possibly you are suffering. He says, I have also got the same thing that you have. But I am showing you the path how I can go, in spite of these weaknesses, how I can lead a spiritual life, how I can go toward the divine. So this is the, what we say, in a modern language, hands-on experience. He wants to show you physically He's not just giving you a preaching and saying, do this, don't do that. So this is the most important thing, where ultimately it says, the avatar of sorrow and suffering must come before there can be the avatar of divine joy. So most of these avatars have gone through this sorrow and suffering, because we are at the stage where we want to come out of this sorrow and suffering. But it says, there will be the avatar of the divine joy, what we call, next future avatars, whatever they are. Now this is where I'm directly connecting the poem, where Aurobindo writes here, the poem says, he who would bring the heavens here must descend himself into clay and the burden of earthly nature bear and tread the dolorous way. The same idea that we have just now read, that he who would bring the heavens here must descend himself into clay. And the same thing, that clay and the suffering and all that we have seen is one of the most important functions of the avatar. Even if you put aside all the three effects of his, leading the way and then the collective effort and all that and the influence, that's one side, the spiritual side. But while he's in the body, the most important thing is he walks the path and shows you the path. So the avatar's most important part is he walks the path. And that is why we say Christ path or Buddha path or the Aurobindo path or Krishna path. We have all spoken about the path, because this is the path that each one of them have trodden, have walked, have left their imprints. So that is why he says that I have a burden of the earthly nature bear and tread the dolorous way. And connecting with these sorrows, I have here a beautiful letter by Aurobindo. Very, very touching, and that shows exactly his avataric work. You say that this way is too difficult for you or the likes of you, and it is only avatars like myself or the mother that can do it. That's a strange misconception. For it is on the contrary, the easiest and simplest and most direct way, and anyone can do it. It is the other way of tension and strain and hard endeavor that is difficult and needs a great force of tapasya. Now this is where you please pay attention. As for the mother and myself, we have had to try all ways, follow all methods to surmount mountains of difficulties, a far heavier burden to bear than you or anybody else in the ashram or outside. Far more difficult conditions, battles to fight, wounds to endure, ways to cleave through impenetrable morass and desert and forest, hostile masses to conquer, a work such as I'm certain none else had to do before us. For the leader of the way in a work like ours has not only to bring down and represent and embody the divine, but to represent too the ascending element in humanity and to bear the burden of humanity in the full and experience. Not in a mere play or leela, but in grim earnest, all the obstruction, difficulty, opposition, baffled and hampered, and only slowly victorious labor which are possible on the path. But it is not necessary, not tolerable, that all that should be repeated over again to the full in the experience of others. It is because we have the complete experience that we can show a straighter and easier road to others, if they will only consent to take it. It is because of our experience won at a tremendous price that we can urge upon you and others, take the psychic attitude, follow the straight sunlit path, with the divine openly or secretly upbearing you. If secretly, He will yet show himself in good time. Do not insist on the hard, hampered, roundabout and difficult journey. I mean, it's a very, very beautiful and a very personal advice that the Mother and Sri Aurobindo are giving. He said that, of course, you have understood, I don't have to explain. But what is important is that they have not taken it as a play, they are not saying, okay, all this is a divine Leela, I'll forget about it, I'll go beyond this consciousness of suffering and I don't want to be touched. He says, no, on the contrary, it's in grim earnest, all the obstruction, difficulty, opposition. So all the problems, difficulties from the physical, vital, mental, whatever level we have, there have been thousands and thousands of letters that disciples have written to Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. But he says even the physical problem they have undergone so that they find the solution in their own physical body before they are able to tell the disciples what is to be done, how is to be done, etc. So at the end he says a very beautiful advice. He says it's because of our experience won at a tremendous price that we can urge upon you and others, take the psychic attitude. So the insistence upon the search, the finding of the psychic being, the ultimately what Mother and Sri Aurobindo would tell us is, take this sunlit path. The sunlit path is the psychic path. Psychic path is trying to realize the psychic being. I mean, not trying to achieve the supermental consciousness, the overmental consciousness or the intuitive consciousness. Nothing, there's no ambition in us. The only thing is drive towards the psychic. And this is out of our deep experience after having gone through so much of problems and all that. They say, we have made the path simple and straight for you. You don't have to repeat all that we have done. You don't have to go through the hardship that we have gone through. This says, don't follow other yogas, other difficulties and all that. We have gone through all that and made a kind of a shortcut for you. The psychic path, the sunlit path. So it's a very beautiful, simple, very loving advice. Follow the straight sunlit path with the divine openly or secretly upbearing you. Because in the psychic path, the real essential attitude is that it is the divine who is upbearing you. You are not making the effort. You are not doing the sadhana. You are not doing the transformation business. You are not to be there. You are only letting the divine to transform you. You are only trying to be open to the divine consciousness and then ask the Mother to do the thing for you. So that is where Sri Aurobindo is saying, divine openly or secretly upbearing you. That is the truth of it. But if we can realize and say and invite the divine to do it for you, that's the only yoga we need to do. The rest of it they take care. So it's very clearly saying that should not be repeated over again to the full in the experience of others. What we have gone through, you don't go through. We have done the labor. We have taken the hardships. In fact, in one of the places, Mother says, I've cleared the thorns on the road. It's just for you to walk now. All the boulders and the thorns and the impediments, we have cleared. We just need to follow this yellow brick road as it's called. Then another place he says, Sri Aurobindo writes, it is not because I have myself trod the sunlit way or flinched from difficulty and suffering and danger. You see, he would say the same thing. I have myself trod the sunlit way or flinched from difficulty and suffering and danger. I've had a full share of these things, and the Mother has had 10 times her full share. But that was because the finders of the way had to face these things in order to conquer. So they are calling themselves not as avatars, but as finders of the way, pathfinders. But that was because the finders of the way had to face these things in order to conquer. No difficulty that can come on the sadhak, but has faced us on the path. Against many we have had to struggle hundreds of times. In fact, that is an understatement. Before we could overcome, many still remain protesting that they have a right until the perfect perfection is there. but we are never consented to admit their inevitable necessity for others. It is in fact to ensure an easier path to others hereafter that we are borne that burden. It was with that object that the mother once prayed to the divine that whatever difficulties, dangers and sufferings were necessary for the path might be laid on her rather than others. It has been so far granted her as a result of daily and terrible struggles for years that those who put an entire and sincere confidence in her are able to follow the sunlit path. And even those who cannot, yet when they do put the trust, find that path suddenly easy, and if it becomes difficult again, it is only when distrust, revolt, abhiman or other darknesses come upon them. The sunlit path is not altogether a fable. But you will ask, what of those who cannot? Well, it is for them I am putting forth all my efforts to bring down the supramental force. Within a measurable time, I know that it will descend, but I am seeking its near descent, and with whatever dark obstruction of the earth nature or furious inroads of the asuric forces seeking to prevent it, it is approaching the terrestrial toil. So this is the single line that I wanted to explain. What is the dolorous way? The dolorous way, descending himself into clay. Here we have directly from Sri Aurobindo his own letter telling us how much they have undergone, the sorrow and suffering. We don't have to repeat what their experience, but time and again is telling us that even the mother has prayed to the divine only to say that give me all the dangers and sufferings and difficulties so that humanity can go smoother. So she and Ionic work that they have done is what the other spiritual masters have done is they have shown the path and asked you to tread it. These are the steps, these are the ways, this is the meditation, this is the concentration, this is this. You tread it, you walk it. But Mother Sri Aurobindo, the contrary, says no. You don't walk the path yourself. As we said, in that beautiful little quote that all of us know, when someone was walking on the beach, he finds two sets of footsteps, his and the one, another beside one, and he knows God is walking beside him. But once he sees only one set of footsteps, he says, why is it that God has abandoned me? God says, no child, I have been carrying you. So the footsteps that you see are mine, you have been being carried on me. So this is the sunlit path, that the divine will carry us, and not like the other time, like the other yogis where you say, oh God is with me, he'll help me. Here God is carrying you on his own shoulders. That is the sunlit path where the mother is telling us that I have done all this for you so that you have only to surrender, as it says sincerely, that full sincere confidence in her and the full surrender as much as we can. So that is and then ultimately he gives us an assurance. But for those who cannot do even this surrender, the sincere surrender and confidence, because there may be people in the world, across the world, who do not know the mother, who do not know Sri Aurobindo, who do not want to be their disciple. They say, fine, I am a disciple of so and so, I've got this yogi, I've got this master, fine. They are not wanting the humanity to be the disciples of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. That is the last thing that they would ever want. Then for that there is a beautiful reply. He says, well, for them I am putting forth all my efforts to bring down the supramental force within a measurable time. I know that it will descend, but I am seeking its near descent, and with whatever dark obstruction of the earth nature or furious inroads of the asuric forces seeking to prevent it, it is approaching the terrestrial soil. So Sri Aurobindo has done both levels, both these works. One, he says, is they have trodden the path, and the second one is those of us who can really become their disciples and surrender ourselves. But then for the general humanity, he says, I am bringing down the supermind so that it comes in a measurable time. And maybe at that time, some people are grumbling that we have to do long sadhana for 30 years for supermind. Maybe, I don't know what was the year exactly, but we can understand. So this must be Nirodharan only, who says, don't forget to make us feel at least the descent. They're all talking about the descent, the supramental descent, In sadhana, in the ashram, many of the sadhaks are all the time concerned, when will the superman come? Somebody will predict in 1948, somebody will say 1938. So there was a talk about it. So Nirodharan says, don't forget to make us feel at least the descent. 30 years sadhana? By Jove. They're so impatient. He says, 30 years we have to wait for the superman. Sri Aurobindo says, 30 years too little or too many? What would have satisfied your rational mind? 3 years? 3 months? 3 weeks? Considering that by ordinary evolution, it could not have been done even at nature's express speed in less than 3,000 years. I want you to listen properly. Nature's express speed, it would not be less than 3,000 years, and would ordinarily have taken anything from 30,000 to 300,000. The transit of 30 years is perhaps not too slow. I just want to give you the immense work done by Mother Sri Aurobindo. Okay, supermind is inevitable. Like the mind was inevitable when the animal came, man was to come, had to come, and did come. But how many millions of years between the animal, between the primate, between human beings? So between the human being and the supermind also it would have taken 3,000 years, 300,000 years, or 30,000 years. And the highest, greatest speed of the nature would have been at least minimum 3,000 years. And he says, sir, I am bringing it in 30 years. Am I asking you too much for it? I picked up this letter only to show you the amount of what Sri Aurobindo squeezed the time to bring supermind. And that 30, it must have been sometimes in 20s, because in 1950 the superman came. So just go back by 20 years or 30 years. So see the intensity of the sadhana when he is saying that we have gone through the dolorous way, how much he has sacrificed and worked and intensified his sadhana to bring down the superman for us. Because he says, for me I don't want superman, I am not here looking for supramental salvation. He says only for the sake of the earth, and that too he says, I am trying to bring it in 30 years. So that was the general grumbling that Sri Aurobindo said. So now he says, in spite of the asuric forces seeking to prevent it, it is approaching the terrestrial soil. So he is giving that much guidance and guarantee that it is already approaching. And there was this question of the furious inroads of the asuric forces. That was during the time of the Second War, when the Hitlerian forces, the forces through Hitler, were working to stop the supramental descent. That's why, as some of you know, the Hitler had a similar kind of a meditation as like we have in Matra Mandir. In Germany he had a place, and he was invoking these asuric forces, and as the mother told us, he was an instrument of asuric forces. And the thing is, when I went to Germany, I was given this understanding, so it is so clear, that on one side we had the black sun. Hitler would call the sun as the black sun, and on the other side we are Sri Aurobindo, the golden sun. So that's what perhaps is referring to. The whatever dark obstruction of the earth nature or furious inroads of the asuric forces. So one side someone was invoking the black sun, the asuric forces, while here in Pondicherry someone was invoking the supramental sun. So there was a battle almost, the asuric forces trying to stop this descent, and here were Mother and Aurobindo pulling it down. So it says, in spite of that, it is approaching the terrestrial soil. The supramental is not, as you imagine, something cold, hard and rock-like. It bears within it the presence of the divine love, as well as the divine truth. And its reign here means, for those who accepted the straight and thornless path, in which there is no wall or obstacle, of which the ancient rishis saw the far-off promise. So this is the question of the suffering and what they have done for us, and in fact, to end this section of the suffering, I read out a letter again by our famous friend Nirodharan. Often I have wondered why you made your cases equal to ours. Did you ever suffer from desires, passions, ignorance, attachment, etc. as we do? You see, in spite of all the Aurobindo writing, Nirodharan has the cheek, which he always had. He had the cheek to write anything he wanted. So he says, did you ever suffer from desires, passions, ignorance, attachments as we do? Aurobindo replies, we have had sufferings and struggles to which yours are a mere child's play. I have not made our cases equal to yours. I have said that the avatar is one who comes to open the way for humanity for a higher consciousness, to a higher consciousness. If nobody can follow the way, then either our conception of the thing, which is that of Christ and Krishna and Buddha also, is all wrong, or the whole life and action of the avatar is quite futile. X seems to say that there is no way and no possibility of following, that the struggles and sufferings of the avatar are unreal and all humbug. There is no possibility of struggle for one who represents the divine. Such an idea makes nonsense of the whole idea of avatarhood. There is no reason in it, no necessity for it, no meaning in it. The divine being all powerful can lift people up without bothering to come down on earth. It is only if it is part of the world arrangement that he should take upon himself the burden of humanity and open the way that avatarhood has any meaning. So this is the last explanation that I wanted to give you about the avatar. The sentence that is noticeable here: the divine being all powerful can lift people up without bothering to come down on earth. You see, when somebody is drowning, there are two ways of helping. One, you can help the person from above, lend your hand and lift him up. The other way is to go down into the water and push him from below. Now, these are the two ways. And the divine says we can do both, any of these ways. One is we can help humanity in its evolutionary aspect by being above, but that means not having the physical form. That there, he says, even Krishna says, that we can send vibhutis, saints and sages and rishis, who can help humanity go further, go forward in spirituality. So he says, it's possible that the divine doesn't have to take a form, and yet he can help lift the humanity, lift the human beings. But then the second point, the second way is better. That he himself plunges into the human nature, plunges into this ignorance. Because this plunging is physically to take the human beings forward. Because the human nature is such that we want to hold the hand, what we say hand holding. So we always want a leader, to see the leader walk in front of us, and not to have an ideal thing, oh the God is there, He is in heaven, He will lead us, He will help us. That's very abstract. But here is an avatar who says, I am beside you, come hold my hand, I will take you through this thorny path. So that is what we call the plunging of the divine into the human nature upon earth. And coming upon earth is to lead human beings by showing, by taking their hand, holding their hand and leading them. So here it says that, so that is the real purpose, is to lead human beings by holding their hands. So Aurobindo is telling us to Mr. Nirodharan that you are thinking that I am an avatar or this avatar or that avatar has no problems and no passions and no ignorance and no attachment. He says, if such were the case, then Christ and Krishna and Buddha, all those things would have been an absolutely false thing and a farce. So till now humanity has been led by this Krishna and Buddha and etc. because they come upon earth in the physical form. So the divines, the main purpose is to hand holding. Take the humanity holding their hands as far as possible. Once he or she leaves the body, then they leave behind their vibrations, their influence, which again takes the human beings, inspires them. That is why there are all the time human beings are seeking gurus. One factor that I've seen is people believe or want human beings, a living human guru, as they would say. You see, if you think of having the mother and Aurobindo, they say, oh no, they are not in the physical, we want a living guru. That's the human tendency, that we want a living guru to hold our hands and take us forward. So that is the human tendency everywhere. So that is why when we say, oh, you can think of Krishna or Christ or Aurobindo, they say, no, they're fine, but they're not there physically. So that is why in India we have so many gurus and ashrams, because people who want to go to this ashram, be under with the guru, speak to him, touch his feet and take his blessings, because that's what man requires. So the avatar comes, he says, I plunge into human nature, so you can touch me, you can take my leadership, you can fall at my feet or cry for your help. So that is one of the things. So he's only arguing that obviously they have suffered from desires, they have suffered from passions, and they have gone into ignorance. Because if they say, no, I don't have ignorance, I don't have passions, I don't have desires, then it would be wrong to say that. Because if they do not have passions and desires and all that, then they are not sharing with us the human problems. So they too have the passions and desires and ignorance and attachment. And yet, they show us the way. Buddha showed the way, the Fourfold Path. He says you have all these problems of death and weakness and illness and old age and all that. But how do you go through? So he said, the Eightfold Path I am giving you. Take this Eightfold Path. Ramakrishna gave some path, he said. So all of them have accepted the human sufferings and given as a path. So as Aurobindo and the mother. But in spite of all that, human beings prefer, if I can say, a guru that is there in the physical yet. They know this guru also will pass away after a few years, but somehow we have the tendency, and a very, very genuine tendency, I am not saying this is a wrong one or right one, it's a genuine tendency that we want to follow a guru. Well, that brings us to the line that I wanted to just one stanza here. And he who would bring the heavens here must descend himself into clay. I mean, as I told you, many of these lines reflect themselves in Savitri. We have here similar lines in Savitri, also in this book 3, I think. We have here, well, same lines, you see, he who would save himself, no, these lines you don't have, this is from Savitri. He who would save himself lives bare and calm. He who would save the race must share its pain. The same thing. He who would bring the heavens here must descend into himself into clay. Same thing it says. He who would save the race must share its pain. This he shall know who obeys an grandiose urge. The great who came to save this suffering world and rescue out of time's shadow and the law must pass beneath the yoke of grief and pain. They are caught by the wheel that they had hoped to break. On their shoulders they must bear man's load of fate. Heaven's riches they bring, their sufferings count the price, or they pay the gift of knowledge with their lives. The Son of God, born as the Son of Man, has drunk the bitter cup, owned Godhead's debt, the debt of the eternal owes to the fallen kind. His will has bound to death and struggling life, that yearns in vain for rest and endless peace. Now is the debt paid, wiped off the original score. The eternal suffers in a human form. He has signed salvation's testament with his blood. He has opened the doors of his undying peace. The deity compensates the creature's claim. The Creator bears the law of pain and death. A retribution smites the incarnate God. But when God's messenger comes to help the world and lead the soul of earth to higher things, he too must carry the yoke he came to unloose. He too must bear the pang that he would heal. Exempt and unafflicted by earth's fate, how shall he cure the ills he never felt? This is a very simple sentence but very beautiful. How shall he cure the ills he never felt? So that is why Sri Aurobindo and the Mother have written, we have known, experienced, felt all your problems, all your pains, all your diseases, so that we can cure. We can find the solution, we can find the medicine for that. So this is the line, how shall he cure the ills he never felt? He covers the world's agony with his calm. But though to the outward eye no sign appears, and peace is given to our torn human hearts, the struggle is there, and paid the unseen price. The fire, the strife, the wrestle are within. He carries the suffering world in his own breast. Its sins weigh on his thoughts, its grief is his. Earth's ancient load lies heavy on his soul. Night and his powers beleaguer his hardy steps. The titan and adversary's clutch he bears. His march is a battle and a pilgrimage. Life's evil smites, he is stricken with the world's pain. A million wounds gape in his secret heart. But remember, all that is beautiful here. He says, but though the outward eye no sign appears, and peace is given to our torn hearts, the struggle is there and paid the unseen price. That's what we have ourselves seen with the Mother, of course, I don't know. That externally, outwardly, they had all the sweetness and the peace and the calm and all that. But whenever we met the Mother, wherever we met her, it was all beautiful, all sweetness, all wonderful, all joy. But as Sri Aurobindo says, the struggle is there and paid the unseen price. The fire, the strife, the wrestle is within. So they are constantly fought, battle within, and but externally it has been a very harmonious, sweet, peaceful and calm. That's why the Mother, as we have seen, could venture into all these activities of the ashram, guiding this department, guiding that individual, writing letters. I mean, I was amazed to see some of the letters that are written when I was going through my file of letters. I mean, sometimes I feel ashamed today looking back that in 1972, I mean, when she was almost 1 year, later she would be leaving her body. But I've written to her so many letters with small things, big things, with school affairs and all that. And the amazing thing is that she replied to all of them, most of my letters. So imagine what must have been the outward contact. She was calm, peaceful, sweet, and also caring for you. It must have been a very simple letter, mother, I want to teach mathematics or geography or history in aspiration school. She would take out the time and she would say, yes, Ananda, you continue to do that. And then one thing that I was deeply touched was, you see, we used to send the letter to the mother in an envelope. I'd write saying, to the mother from Ananda Reddy. It's not just that she signed the letter and gave it to her assistant and said, pack it back to Ananda. She would take the envelope, cut off to the mother, she would say to, and from Ananda Reddy, from she would cut out from. Instead of from, she would say to, and the mother to. I mean, it was a simple gesture, but imagine in her millions of works, hundreds of works, dozens of works per day, she had all the patience, all the love, all the care to take an envelope and to see. I've got many envelopes, I was looking into that. From Ananda Reddy, she would take out the from and write to. So sometimes it really amazes me that she would take out from that infinite time. It would take maybe 5 seconds, 10 seconds. It's not the seconds of time, it's the question of love and care. So that is where we see inwardly whatever struggle she was going through, the fight that she was going through. Outwardly, there's all this, what he calls here, there is the peace outwardly, there's a calm. He covers the world agony with his calm, but though to the outward eye no sign appears. Never have we seen the mother, in rough or disturbed or puzzled or, frustrated or disillusioned. She had all the time. And yet within, there is all the battle. You see the agenda, you see the battle that she was going through for the physical transformation. But you see her letters, you see her other volumes, we don't see that battle at all, except in volume number 1, Notes on the Way. We see a mother guiding school children, guiding physical education, coming to in the evening to her playground, seeing me run, seeing me do wrestling. So that is the beauty of this avatar, that they drink this pain, as we see the famous story, Shiva drinking the poison of humanity which gets stuck in his throat. So here is what the avatar does, that he too must carry the yoke he came to unloose. So these 4 stanzas are nothing but a single line, that he too must carry the pang that he would heal. Otherwise, how will he heal without his experience? And then ultimately we see one more line here. And of course that line we have somewhere else. But it's a long passage which you can read later. So this is the first stanza. Yeah, I'll just read the second one because then before we're leaving. Coercing my Godhead, I have come down here on the sordid earth. Ignorant, laboring human groan twixt the gates of death and birth. I have been digging deep and long, made a horror of filth and mire, a bed for the golden river's song, a home for the deathless fire. I have labored and suffered in matter's night to bring the fire to man, but the hate of hell and human spite are my meed since the world began. Well, we'll take up now. This is the basic idea I've given you about the avatar's dolorous way, his suffering, and one line that we should pay attention to is, coercing my Godhead, I have come down here on this sordid earth. I think the mother explains in somewhere that she has at least if you remember this the mother, the line that Sri Aurobindo writes about that the mother in her deep love for humanity has put on herself this human form and suffering. So that's what I wanted to see, coercing and putting upon herself or in fact forcing herself to take upon this human suffering because of the love that they have for the human creature. It's not that they are just for the fun of it, but for the love that they have, they say that they have put on this human form. Well, I think I have the passage here. Yeah. In her deep and great love for her children, she has consented to put on herself the cloak of this obscurity, condemned to bear the attacks and torturing influences of the powers of the darkness and the falsehood, born to pass through the portals of birth, and birth that is death. We have the same line in the poem, portals of death and birth. Twixt the gates of death and birth, the same thing appears here. And born to pass through the portals of the birth, that is death, taken upon herself the pangs and sorrows and sufferings of the creation, since it seemed that thus alone could it be lifted to the light and joy and truth and eternal life. This is the great sacrifice called sometimes the sacrifice of the Purusha, but much more deeply the holocaust of Prakriti, the sacrifice of the Divine Mother. This is the essence of incarnation. This is from the little book, The Mother. In a deep and great love for her children, she has consented to put on herself the cloak of obscurity. You see, same thing here. He ignorant, laboring human, grown twixt the gates of death and birth. And Mother also, Shwamda says the same thing about the Mother. She has taken upon herself the pangs and sorrows and sufferings of the creation. Since it seemed that thus alone, please pay attention to the word, that thus alone could it be lifted to the light. That alone, you see, this is so important. If she had not come down into the physical, she could not have brought down the light and joy and truth and eternal life. That's why Sri Aurobindo adds the word, and thus alone. Otherwise, we should not miss that little phrase saying, oh, she has come down. No. It is only by coming down, by that process alone, could she have brought this light and new consciousness. So that little phrase has an immense meaning in the incarnation of the avatar. That's what we have been emphasizing upon. So when it says, I've come down on the solid earth between the gates of death and birth, that is important here. Well, the next ones we will take up, that brings us to the physical transformation. So I will leave it for our next discussion tomorrow, and we will see from there on. So we will stop here. We will take up the next stanza 6 and 7 onwards tomorrow. Yeah, we will have a minute's concentration now.